What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of the Hoop Venue podcast. My name is Tyler, and the NBA season is underway. Just to set the scene for you guys, we're recording on October 25th, right before the games start, like an hour before the game starts. So we're coming off a night of Nuggets and Thunder, Wolves and Kings, Spurs and Mavs. We're 3 days into the NBA season, I want to say. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's 3 nights. We've already seen some teams play 2 games. Every team has played a game. We've got a lot to talk about. And of course, I'm here with Sean. I'm going to start it off right away. I didn't catch most of the Nuggets and Thunder game from last night. So I want to hear your biggest takeaways from that game, Sean, because that's arguably the 2 best teams in the West going at it on game 1.
Yeah, this is more about like OKC, I think, than it is about Denver in general. Denver had some weird timing stuff last night that I'm not really worried about, like going forward. There's a few different possessions, and you've probably seen them clipped on Twitter where they reverted back to 1990s like basketball spacing, where because they like to use Aaron Gordon as a off ball screener and things like that. But if he's screening for Christian Brown, for example, then the defense doesn't care about that. We saw that a few different times. I think Brown in general played fine, but in terms of like maximizing their floor spacing, if you double Jokic now and like Christian Brown's space on the perimeter, we're more rather to live with that than the best post scorer of the past 2 decades in Jokic. But OKC, man. First off, Mark Daigneault is a wizard. They run probably the most like flat ball screens I've ever out of any NBA team. Flat like pick and rolls. They run it with their guards a lot, so it's a guard-to-guard flat pick and roll where it's you'll see the guard or the screener like at the top of the key, like feet on the 3-point line, and ball handler drive it down, and he's just gonna screen the the defender's back, or most times just kind of ghost out of there, try to get a downhill driving angle for like SGA. They ran this super creative. See if I can send it to you and find it when I go back. They ran a super like weird and creative misdirection set, which again, legitimately never seen before. It gets some wide open buckets. And then, they obviously do their same stuff with Chet in the open floor, which is again, I guess, insanely creative. I want to call them like Chet players because nobody does it. It's only for him. And you know what I'm talking about, where most teams have their bigs run the rim, which there's obviously a benefit of that. But with OKC's 5-out offense, they'll have, we're going to will it into existence. The Chet player, they'll have a guard. Chet will kind of like run up the slot. And they'll have a guard set like this pin like kind of flare screen for Chet running in transition. And it's so effective because, again, like most bigs defensively are taught, I got to protect the rim, I got to be the anchor for the defense. And now it's, oh, shoot, I have to guard Chet off this flare screen in early offense. And Chet showed multiple times throughout this game to be able to attack off the dribble, hit a couple of nice pull-up jumpers and things like that. SGA is obviously insane, but, they did all of this, Tyler, while shooting just egregious from 3 on opening night. Isaiah Joe was like 1 for 6 from 3. Hold on, pull it up. Isaiah Joe 1 for 6. SGA 2 for 6 from 3. J-Dub had a pretty bad offensive game. 5 for 16 overall. He had 5 turnovers. They hit 8 threes. They shot 22% from 3 as a team. They are missing Hardenstein, obviously. Still no Jalen Williams with the big. But they still kind of dominated this game, particularly in the second half. And SGA is a route to an MVP caliber season as long as this team performs how we expect them to.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't catch most of the game. I caught the end of the 3rd quarter, some of the 4th. But I went back this morning and tried to rewatch what I could. I didn't watch it in its entirety, but I kind of broke it up, looked at a bunch of different possessions. And I'm glad you mentioned the Chet flares, because those are just like the ultimate way. I'm going to call it that too. The get him going downhill, because not only do you have to worry about him as a shooting threat, he's mobile and skilled enough as a 7-foot guy to put the ball on the deck and attack those closeouts. And a lot of his offense came from that last year, just early flares in the offense, and he's going to either shoot or put it on the deck. One thing that stood out to me last night and going back to last season was when Chet would come off those flares often, it would be shoot or drive or nothing. It'd be like, I can shoot, I can drive, or I'm just going to give it back and we're going to reset the offense. One thing that really stood out to me about last night is there was one specific flare. I can't remember what quarter it was, what the game situation was, but I think Aaron Gordon started on Chet, or it was either Gordon or Jokic. The screen came. They switched MPJ onto Chet.
Yep,
Chet caught the ball with no angle and then ISO'd. He took that matchup and played one-on-one and had a super physical drive that ended, I think, in an and one. And I was like,
second quarter, I think, because they were going left. They were going left.
Yeah. I was like, oh man, that's new, because Chet didn't really have much on ball. He didn't really attack much on ball. Not that it wasn't in his game at all. It just wasn't really a part of his shot diet. And if Chet's going to take that on ball leap, this team's scarier than even we thought. We both had them number one in the West. But if that's a real thing, like Chet isolating mismatches, playing physical, putting pressure on the rim like that, that's serious, because Chet had a masterclass last night. Everything I've seen, like defensively, offensively, everything we saw, he did pretty much perfect. There were two new things that really stood out to me. And again, they're not necessarily new. It just felt a little bit different. One was the decisiveness on his pull-up mid-range jumper. Like attacking a closeout, one dribble, pull up. Attacking a closeout, two dribbles. Paint comes up, pull up. That's Kevin Durant. And I'm not saying Chet's Kevin Durant, but that's literally what Kevin Durant would do. And the other one was the passing, dude. Attacking a closeout and then dropping it off to the dunker spot. Again, that's new.
He had a sick pass to Lou Dort where, I think, again, tacks a closeout. I think he drives middle and then defense commits, and Lou Dort just has this baseline cut. Yeah, but Chet has to put an angle on the pass, too, because there's, the crash down to Lou Dort. Puts the ball perfectly. Now, Lou Dort, this is early in the game, too. Now, Lou Dort kind of has this really weird layup attempt, but it counts as an and one. So, adding on to that point.
And there was another one. I think this one was also to Dort, maybe same quarter. Chet was used as the screener. Obviously, Denver had that weird, zone screen and roll coverage. I don't know if you picked up on that. They were, zoning up the pick and rolls and letting Chet catch the ball in the middle.
What do they call it in, Europe? It's next up, I think. Or next
I'm not
pick
sure,
and roll coverage.
That might be what it is. Yeah, and then everyone kind of shifts. Yeah. They were kind of zoning up and letting Chet catch the ball in the middle. There was one where he caught it in the middle and turned around and hit a mid-range jumper. Russ actually made a great rotation from the weak side and contested it, but he just shot over him because he's big. The next time they met him earlier, and he actually had to, again, create an angle to wrap the ball around the defender and hit the dunker spot, and he did it quick. It was on target, and it was another assist. I think he had 4 assists, but they were legit assists. Yeah, 4 or 5, and they weren't dribble handoffs. They were legit assists. So the passing, the decisiveness as with his pull-up jumper, and also like I said, that isolation really stood out to me. Not to spend too much time on one game, there was just one more thing I wanted to ask you because I didn't really have time to look into this. First impression of the Westbrook minutes. What'd you gather?
I think that this might just be a tough play for Russ against a team like OKC, where your bench matchup in air quotes is not always gonna be apples to apples, but your bench matchup is Cason Wallace or Alex Caruso, and then when they get healthy, it's Hardenstein or Chet, right? So I still think, again, the game plan was great for OKC. To the point where I'm doing a Chet film breakdown once we're done with this, but I just think it was a bad matchup. I think Russ has some stuff that this team really needs still. I think his paint touches ability to just get to the paint and dish out. Some of the lineups I just wasn't a fan of. I think I want to say they ran a lineup at one point of him, Aaron Gordon, and Christian Brown on the floor. So essentially him with the rest of the starters and. No more, please, Michael Malone. We need to let Russ go with Jokic and the bench. Jokic, Julian Strother, if you want to throw MPJ in there, whatever, but let that be the group. I'm not putting Russ next to Christian Brown. That'd be great defensively, sure, but I guess nobody's going to score for that 4-minute stretch unless Jokic goes nuts. And like you said, not to spend too much time on this one game, but I do want to point out the tweet that you tweeted out. I want to say, okay.
Yeah.
You want to take it then?
I was gonna say it doesn't matter. I made a tweet talking about how I think the best pathway to a successful Nuggets season might be empty the clip Jokic because
Yeah.
he doesn't really need much space to operate as a scorer. Obviously, every scorer will benefit from space in some way, but his ability to get the ball up over defenders and his tough shot making and his weird timing, like he's not a guy that needs space. Space is a luxury, and I think he could get like if he really needed to look no further than the Golden State series in 2022. He had zero spacing, and the last 3 games I think averaged like 35 points per game on 68% true shooting or something stupid. And it's like Jokic can give you that type of efficiency on 30 points per game. So what I was saying is like maybe with this lack of spacing going on, maybe since they lost one of their critical shooters, the best pathway to the Nuggets being as good as they were in the last 2 years is Jokic ramping up that scoring to 29 or 30 points a game, even if you are sacrificing some assists, some efficiency. I don't know if you agree with that. I think because you were bringing it up, you probably agree.
Yeah. Or at least like in certain matchups where, again, this is probably one of the worst Jamal Murray matchups, especially like this iteration of Jamal Murray, where, again, it's Kaysen, it's J-Dub, it's Caruso, it's Dort, right? And I love how they use Lou Dort too defensively, but I'm full agreement with you. Like Jokic, empty the clip, shoot 25 shots. Yeah, who cares?
Exactly. And also, I think people are viewing it as like because OKC obviously sent a lot of doubles to Jokic. I did notice that as well. And people are saying, well, they're doubling him. He's got to pass out. And it's like, yes, Jokic is the type of passer that you want him doing that consistently. Because it's like LeBron. It's like you don't double him. But if the shooters aren't hitting shots, you kind of want him forcing the issue a little bit more. And people are saying, well, he just can't because there's 2 bodies on him, paint's packed, whatever. I mean, there's a guy in Philly who, sure, is a different type of scorer than Jokic. He gets doubled every single time he even comes close to touching the ball, and he's averaging 35 points a game. So I don't want to hear about, like, just because a player's being doubled, they can't still score 30 points. Like, there's a guy who literally can't catch the ball without seeing a double, and he would have been a third straight scoring champ had he not gotten injured. So I definitely think, and I'm not asking Jokic to average 35 points a game. I'm saying just ramp up the field goal attempts a little bit, and he probably won't do that because that's just not really the type of player he is. I just think it would maybe be best for the Nuggets long term. But while we're talking about Western Conference contenders, another thing I wanted to talk about was the Wolves because they've played 2 games now. And I know you caught the Lakers game. I caught both games. The Lakers game specifically I think is kind of funny because it was 1 game and everyone was right about the Julius Randle fit. That was it. My whole timeline on Twitter was, I told you guys it wouldn't work. They better start looking for potential trade suitors. And then that lasted like 2 days. And then game 2, he has an uber efficient 33 points in a win. And it's like, okay, I've got a few things, a few takeaways, I guess we could say about their first 2 games. The main one is the Lakers are a very bad matchup for the Timberwolves. And it's not just because they have an elite rim protector in AD. I think it's specifically about the Randle thing where they have 3 guys in their starting lineup that essentially have the same build. And Randle's probably Randle's best skill is his ability to punish mismatches with bully ball, like whether that's as a slasher, whether it's in the post. Like he just abuses smaller players. And I think that's funny because probably his best possession against the Lakers was when Bronny checked in and he immediately punted for Bronny on a switch. And it was like, yeah, that's what Randle does. Problem is in the Lakers starting lineup, if you're hiding D'Lo and Reeves, there's nobody for Randle to do that with. Like, you can't run a pick and roll with Gobert. AD's just going to come and switch on to Randle, and that's an even worse matchup. So that, to me, is the problem. It's a matchup thing. It wasn't a Randle clunky fit thing to me. And then against the Kings, they're running lineups of Fox, Herter, DeRozan, Keegan Murray playing the 4. And it's like, okay, now everyone's a mismatch for Randle. You get Sabonis on him, he's too quick. You get any of those other guys on him, they're not big enough. And so Randle just hunted for mismatches pretty much every single play and just abused them. There was one point in the second quarter where the Kings went to they started the second quarter with a small lineup. Trey Lyles was at the 5. and Randle just abused them. They tried going to a zone, and then Randle was posting up Kevin Huerter up top and just bullying his way to the paint. And it was like they just couldn't do anything with this guy. He got to the rim and the free throw line with ease. The three ball was falling, which is always a bonus for him. And then when they tried to double him, he was spraying it out to one of their shooters. And that it was like the actualized version of what everyone thought the Randle trade could be, everyone on the positive side. And it only took one game. It only took one game, one bad game to get to that point. I don't know how you feel about it. I know you have more opinions on the Lakers game. I don't know if you saw anything different.
No, that's about right. And it again, I saw a tweet talking about this a little bit off air. Minnesota, they had a good playoff run, but they ran it. Their 2 playoff series wins were against teams with non-floor space. With great rim protectors or drop bigs even. Like Phoenix, it's Yusuf Nurkic, it's Drew Eubanks, and Kevin Durant, small ball 5. Denver, it's Jokic, and really last year for them it's like Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson, I guess. And then you get to the Dallas series, and it's we have 2 guys we have to worry about as like vertical drop coverage bigs that are uber athletic in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, and then you combine which heavily impacts Anthony Edwards and kind of his driving space, be able to finish over those guys at the rim. And I'll touch on Ant just a sec, but that's not even like adding on to the fact, which I didn't really think about, but it makes perfect sense, like what you were saying with Randle and the Lakers matchup. You have 6'9" Braun, similar build. 6'7", I guess, Rui Hachimura. Maybe have him listed at 6'8", but again, like his strength is kind of similar. He's big, can attack mismatches, whatever, and that's like probably the ideal matchup for Rui defensively. And then it's AD, right, who obviously can guard Gobert, and we'll touch on more of the Lakers in a sec. But Anthony Edwards has to develop as a playmaker. Not even a playmaker, just a decision maker. And again, it's way too early to victory lap, but we said in the preview show, talking about the Timberwolves, right? I said more specifically, I think Ant is a lot closer to 20 than my good buddy like Jason Timpf has him 5th. And I think that's drunk, right? He's way closer to being number 20 than he is being 5. And it's because of just the night in, night out consistency with his decision making. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. If we're talking about purely as an offensive talent, is Anthony Edwards better than John Morant as an offensive player? Like, no. I don't think he is.
Yeah, to piggyback off that point, we're going to talk about Ja in a little bit, and it's like that is the stark difference, their decision making. I think Ant, obviously, like just in terms of being a downhill athlete, like you kind of have a similarity with Ant and Ja, where it's like no one in the league can stay in front of their first step, and I would even argue Ant has a little bit more scoring punch with it, with the pull up 3. Some of the mid-range stuff he's shown in the playoffs. Again, that hasn't been consistent, but when it's been necessary, he's had a really nice mid-range attack in the playoffs. One big difference between the two as well is because they're so predicated on driving, I think Ja's addition of the floater is a pretty big thing. Ant doesn't have the floater at all, and that's kind of probably the best counter you can have as a driver when you can't get to the rim. But the big thing is the decision making, the passing. Like Ja is such an elite passer. And Ant can make those reads where it's like, yeah, I see the help coming, I'm going to spray it out to a shooter. But there's not a lot of anticipation. It's all reactive. Ant isn't actively seeing openings unfold and pre-positioning passes, things like that. And while we're talking about decision-making, I had another thing written down here. The most concerning thing I've seen with Ant through the first 2 games is his actual shot diet. It feels like there's an analytical type of thing where it's like, hey, we want you turning those long 2s into pull-up 3s, which is good, right? That's a good thing for the most part. Except it's gotten to the point where it feels like he's trading drives for pull-up 3s. And I don't know if that's due to the Randle clunkiness early, like trying to figure out that fit. But in the first 2 games, he took 13 and 15 threes. That's like prime Steph Curry number, probably even more than prime Steph Curry numbers. And I do like that Ant's got the pull-up 3, but you don't need to be taking 15 threes. Like, he's averaging 14 threes through the first 2 games. That's not a healthy diet for a guy who's game is predicated on getting downhill, which, credit to him though, the final possession of the Kings game for the win was him forcing the issue downhill, drawing a foul, and finishing the game at the free throw line. But yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, like the threes.
I do want to add this quick stat while you were researching that. Last season, or not researching that, but explaining your point. Last season, Anthony Edwards drives per game in the regular season, 14.6 drives per game in the regular season. If you go to the playoffs for Ant, last season Ant averaged 15.4, which is actually pretty cool that number increased even more come playoff time. So far, very, very limited sample size, obviously, right? But through 2 games, he's only averaging 11 drives per game. As a matter of fact, Julius Randle, which not really surprising, is outpacing him right now in drives per game. And, I mean, that's, I guess, one of the biggest reasons why you get a Randle, where in the playoffs last season, nobody else on the team had higher than 8 drives per game, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But to your point, like, he is, like, kind of settling a little bit more. I did especially recognize that in the Lakers game where, I mean, Ant, I'm glad that he's kind of turned into at least a semi-reliable pull-up shooter. But at the end of the day, if I'm a defense or you got to live with something, I'm going to live with Anthony Edwards shooting 15 threes a game, which obviously that's not going to hold up. But I'm going to live with you shooting 9 threes a game even, as opposed to that being 6 and you putting more pressure on the rim and drawing more fouls or getting like your driving kick game going and setting up a DiVincenzo or a Conley. But I think also kind of help with the driving problem. I don't know if you can call it a problem quite yet, because again, similar thing here where outside of Randle and Ant, nobody else has higher than 5 drives per game right now, and that's DiVincenzo and Conley tied. I mean, I don't know if they have enough space right now, but man, you gotta play Rob, I think, at some point. That's one of my initial takes, like kind of like on opening night watching that Lakers game, was, man, like this bench needs some juice from like the guard spot, right? Dante's great, but not like in the way that I'm kind of thinking where like, let's add some juice, let's add some like real scoring capability not derived from Ant or Julius, if that makes sense. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, it's a question of matchups to me. Like, I think in the Lakers game, Rob definitely should have gotten some run, and it's a difference of, do we need more juice or do we need more organization? When you need the offense to be organized, that's when you go to Joe Ingles, because that's just kind of his best skill. Like, in terms of, I know there was, I can't think of the Twitter account. I think he might be someone who actually covers the Timberwolves full time, but he highlighted a bunch of what Ingles did, and a lot of it was like very little things. They get to the end of the shot clock, Ingles calls for the ball and quickly organizes the offense. They get a spot up 3 instead of like an isolation forced bucket. And it's just like those little things on the margins that can kind of improve the efficiency. And I do think Ingles does that really well with his shooting, with his passing, with just veteran knowledge in general. Yeah, exactly. But Rob, like you said, like the ability to just beat your defender, beat the first line of defense, put the defense in rotation. Yeah. I definitely think there were moments where that would have been more valuable, even if it comes with some level of like mistakes. Like I think there were moments in the 2022 Nuggets season where you're like scratching your head, why is Bones Highland on the floor? And then he goes on like a heater for 6 minutes, and you're like, that's why Bones Highland's on the floor, because he can simulate a star for extended periods of time when they don't have that juice to come from anywhere else. And I do think there's a similar thing there with Rob, where it's like he can be an explosive scorer, but he can also beat his defender off the dribble, put the defense in rotation. And just one last thing on the Wolves, because you inspired me to go check it out when you talked about the drives per game. I'd also like to add that, so you said Ant averaged 14.6 drives per game in the last regular season. I'd also like to point out that was playing 35 minutes a game. Those 11 drives through the first 2 games are in 40 minutes a game. So that's an even stronger ratio of like, that's 5 more minutes with 4 less drives. So, I definitely think there's a level of, he's just not attacking as much. And I think we're both in agreement there. I'm not sure.
I'm coming off as such an Ant hater now. I'm coming like, people are going to think I'm such an Ant hater.
I love Ant. I love Ant's game. It's just like, I mean, it's the reason we talk about him like this
is because thing.
Well, and also we hold him to the expectations of what we think he can be. Like we expect him to take that jump to that next echelon of player, and so we're comparing him to those players. Like we're comparing him to a LeBron James, a Jason Tatum, any of those guys, because those are the leaps that they had to take to reach that level of superstardom, and that's what we expect Ant to do at some point. We're just talking about how he can get there. Speaking of which, that's actually a perfect segue. You just did that beautifully, because the next guy I want to talk about is Wemby, with the Spurs and their debut. And there's a lot of stuff that I feel like could be said that would kind of make me sound like a Wemby hater, and I don't want to come off in that way at all. But and again, I don't want to overreact to one game. If he goes on and averages 30 the rest of the season, I would just look like an idiot. But we talked about this in the preview episode. Everyone kind of jumped the gun on what the Spurs were going to be and what Wemby was going to be already. Like, I think even in just a limited time in game one, there was so much that just is still so raw in his game on both ends of the floor. Like, there were a few moments where his positioning was off defensively, whether that was in drop coverage or just as a man defender. And then there were really good defensive flashes, like holding up with Luka on a switch or a big vertical block he had on either Gafford or Lively right before the half. But specifically the offense, I don't know whether to attribute this to Wemby or to the team or to the coach, whatever the case may be, but he's just being completely misused right now, and I'm scared that he's building tendencies that are going to stick with him even when the team improves, like the forced post-ups, the early shot clock threes, the fumbling turnovers. Like, I know the Spurs don't have a lot of offensive talent, but I still want to see Wemby used more like, I keep seeing this comparison on Twitter. He's going the Kevin Durant route when he should be going the Anthony Davis route and just be this absurdly supersized play finisher that can also do these on-ball things. It's a problem of just because you can do everything doesn't mean you need to be doing everything. Wemby doesn't need to be playing like a wing. Like pull-up threes, turnaround fades, those should be the counter, not the go-to. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement. I was actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just having a conversation with my athletic director at the high school I coached at earlier about Wemby. And one of the points that came up in that conversation was just like, man, this just isn't sustainable, right? Where from an offensive like output standpoint, right? He's going to have those insane like 40-point games even, right? Where everything's falling. You can't guard him. You can't guard him by the basket. Then, God forbid, he's knocking down the pull-up threes. He's knocking down the post fades or whatever. Then it's just over for you, right? But from a sustainability standpoint, with the efficiency not there, it's no way that this can be continued like long term. And it's funny, like the AD thing that you brought up there, because I was actually gonna go this isn't like the comparison of how he should be used, but I mean, the guy that gets just dogged a lot for the amount of jumpers he shoots is Joel Embiid, right? Like, Embiid takes a lot of jumpers, right? But Embiid's also going to get 12 free throws a game, and he's also, like, outside of Jokic, the second highest post-up, like, volume guy in the league. So, even in those games, and, I mean, Embiid's also, like a top 4 passing, like, true big in the league. So, like, okay, cool. Embiid shot jumper, the jump shots in particular isn't falling. Kind of like you said, it's not the counter. I mean, it's not the go-to. That the jumper, in a sense, is the counter where that's not falling. Oh, well, we'll just feed you the ball on the block 14 times a game. You get 14 free throws, and then you're going to get your 25 anyway.
Yeah, and I also want to add, Embiid shoots like 50% on mid-range pull-ups.
Yeah, exactly.
Wemby just simply hasn't shown to be anywhere near that caliber of shooter. And again, he could take that leap. Like, Embiid wasn't like that coming into the league. But like, Embiid added that left hanging hezzy pull-up jumper, and it's just so automatic. It's like a freaking layup from 16 feet out. And Wemby doesn't have anything like that. They're forcing him post-ups. And I also want to add that the Mavs did something that I think is like a precursor to what we'll see in the playoffs if the Spurs end up getting there in the next couple of years.
Not this year. Okay,
yeah,
good.
I don't think it'll be this year either, but God forbid they get there this year or maybe next year. The Mavs switched every single action that he was involved in with all of their wings. So it would be Klay Thompson, it'd be Luka, it'd be whoever, Najee Marshall, just wing to wing to wing to wing to wing, and then they'd push him out to the three-point line. Pretty much all of his catches were outside of like 15 feet, and then he's not physical enough to bully his way inside because he just doesn't have that type of frame. So what ended up happening is he'd just be standing there like 15 feet out, backing into nothing, and it would be like, okay, they don't even have to double because if he turns, it's like a 40% mid-range shot. Don't give him any passing angles. And then so he ended up, I think he turned the ball over 3 times in like the first 5 minutes. And again, I don't want to overreact to one bad game, but it's the way the offense is operating and the tendencies they're forcing him into. Like, Wemby shouldn't be force-fed 15-foot post-ups. He should be more off ball. He should be cleaning up on the offensive glass. Like, I would love to see him play. Again, the skill set is completely different, but I'd like to see him play a more similar role to Derek Lively, which kind of sucks because the Spurs don't have a Luka. They don't have a Kyrie that can really just consistently make the game easy for him. And Chris Paul at age 78 just simply isn't going to be that guy for them. Speaking, and again, just like I had to mention with Ant was like the reason we're talking about him in this way is because of the standard we're holding him to. I think Wemby probably had the best rookie season since Tim Duncan. And so it's not like I'm being a downer on his like generational being maybe the best prospect ever or what his ceiling looks like. Again, I'm trying to compare him to the other all-time greats and the steps they had to take. And I think we jumped the gun a little bit on a guy who still is very raw.
So while you were talking there, I wanted to go back and kind of look at some of the turnovers really quickly. And if you want to go back and rewatch this, we're on the 7:25 mark in the first quarter. They go like a DHO action, excuse me, with him and Jeremy Sohan, and Klay just switches it. Klay was guarding Jeremy, switches the ball screen, ultra pressure on Wemby, and just pretty easily, like good ball pressure and good active hands or whatever, forces a turnover. But again, it kind of just said, hey, Wemby, go ahead. Like, we're going to have pressure on you. We're going to eliminate clean passing angles. Like, they still kind of gave up some stuff. But eliminate those clean angles, like you said. And like they were able to, especially early on, like you pointed out there, force some pretty easy turnovers on Wemby. For
sure. And then last point on this game, the Mavs-Spurs game, I just want to throw out there that Derek Lively looked freaking awesome. Like, he's just such a good player. I'm fully on the Derek Lively train. I just had to quickly throw that out there. He had like 6 assists, I think, was great defensively, just awesome player. Switching gears, because we were just talking about flaws, so now we're going to jump to the team with seemingly no flaws, and that's the Boston Celtics. They just played their second game against the Wizards, and I'm not sure if you caught the Knicks game. I think you texted me that you missed it initially, but maybe rewatched it, or some of it, whatever it was. They played literally perfect basketball against the Knicks on both ends. Like, it was the ultimate display. I don't even care that they tied the record for the most made threes ever, even after emptying their bench with like 8 minutes left. That's not even what I'm worried about. I'm worried about, like, they looked like the beautiful game Spurs, the way they were moving the ball, the way everyone was involved, and then defensively, like, they were so on point with their game plan. There was a possession, I'm not sure if you saw this, people were clipping it on Twitter, where Luke Cornett checked in, and they put him on the back line, and they wanted to keep him out of the action. And the Knicks tried like 4 different actions to get Cornett up on the ball.
They pre-switched them all?
Yeah, and it was like, it didn't even have to be communicated or anything. Like, it was like, it literally looked like a video game. Yeah, it was like they were just moving. It was like a chessboard, and you're just moving the pieces around to cover Cornett. And it was, I'd never seen, it was like prime Warriors defensive execution. And it just kind of freaked me out a little bit because I'm like, oh God, are we about to witness a 70-win season that just runs through the league? Like, I don't know. But through 2 games, they're averaging 53 3-point attempts per game. Jason Tatum looks ridiculously good. So I can understand why people wouldn't want to watch the Celtics right now because we kind of know what's happening. I don't know how much you've watched or what you've picked up on, but like, what are your thoughts on the Celtics right now?
So, admittedly, I did not watch the Wizards game. And the Knicks game, I caught the second half, like barely part of the second half, but it was a blowout by that point. But before I continue my point, there's 2 games next week that I'm definitely glued into. Them at home against Milwaukee on Monday, and then them at Indiana on Wednesday. Those are 2 games that I'm definitely tuned into. I guess really my biggest point that I want to get off about the Celtics, it's about, you saw this a lot. I'm sure you saw this a lot on opening night, Tyler. The Celtics are ruining basketball or whatever with kind of their offensive approach. And, I mean, one, I think that's just not true because I don't think it's replicable, if that makes sense. Because I think the way Boston plays, one, they have specifically designed their roster to be this way. Like, their roster is, at least their core guys, right? Their top 8 when they're fully healthy. Can all dribble, pass, shoot. They can all, for the most part, defend pretty well, and that pretty well is like just the floor of these guys defensively. And then they can all, for the most part, at least initiate some action. Where if we wanted to go just with our 5-out spacing and drive and kick and stuff like that, they can all kind of initiate that pretty much from a standstill. Kristaps would be more from the post, and that's the scary thing. They are missing like the 5th best pound for pound post up player in the league right now that doesn't get talked about. They're missing that guy. So you add that guy that is also one of the best stretch bigs on the planet,
and their best rim protector,
right? And a legitimately great defender. I think we're just coming to the conclusion Kristaps is underrated. The decision making from Tatum is like sharp and on point. It's ridiculous. And again, Missoula is really, really good. I love their basic spacing concepts. That it's them. They do it a lot. Indiana does it. Atlanta does it. Atlanta is really cool how they do it. We'll touch on them in a second. Then OKC, kind of like the 5 slot stuff where it just changes how a defense has to guard you. Because again, if we're going back to typically how defenses are built around it. Hey, look, we're gonna have our big on the back line as our anchor. Kind of let him communicate and do stuff like that. And it literally just anchor a defense. But that's because the big on offense is typically in the dunker spot or in the corner if you go traditional 5-out. Milwaukee did this in the Philly game too. But especially if you have a floor spacer, you put him in the slot. Okay, now your rim protector, your goalie defensively, isn't that elite rim protecting big anymore because he's now up guarding on the wing or in the slot, in the gap more. And Boston, that helps Boston create so many more driving angles, puts defenses in a way more rotation. Again, those are the 2 games that I'm really looking out for because I think those are probably the 2 teams I would say have the best bet at somehow dethroning Boston would be actually for me, I think Milwaukee and Indiana. Milwaukee because they just have Dame and Giannis, he's the second best player in the league, and Dame returns to form, a top 10 guy. And then Indiana, they just overwhelm you offensively. So kind of seeing that matchup. So, I mean, Boston's insane.
That's pretty interesting to me because I feel like the unanimous kind of, not for us, I know neither of us thought this, but going into the season, everyone kind of viewed the Knicks as like the ultimate threat to Boston. And then people used that game to make a larger point about what they expected the Knicks to be. And it was like, McHale and OG just aren't doing it for me on the wings. And I kind of threw a little note on here. I don't think that game was a representation of the Knicks' lack of wings. I think it was a representation of the lack of ability for anyone to guard the Celtics. Like McHale and OG, McHale I think is a little bit undersized as a wing defender. You kind of want him on guards. He's just not very strong. And so against 2 guys who are really strong in Tatum and Brown, when coupled with the fact that you're not really going to get much help without giving up an open 3, he's already at a disadvantage. And OG, for as good as he is as a man defender, you can't expect him to fight through a bunch of screens, stick with Tatum and Brown again without giving up something. That team is just so talented. Like, if you find a way to stop Tatum, Derek White's going to come off a pick and roll and, he can shoot a pull-up 3, even though he's like our 3rd or 4th offensive option. I'm waiting to see more from the Knicks. I don't think that game
they play Indiana in like an hour and a half, right? So right where we're done with this.
Yeah,
Chet breakdown might have to get put on pause for that game.
And I think we might I think we might see a better performance from Mikal. I'm assuming Mikal's going to guard Halliburton, and that's
I
more
would
the type
assume.
of that's more the type of matchup I think he can thrive in. So maybe we'll see like with the Randle thing. Everyone ran their victory lap after game 1. Maybe game 2 is a shift. Oh, Mikal's actually pretty good at defense. Whatever the case may be. But yeah, I'm waiting to see more on the Knicks. Celtics, I don't need to see any more. They're just a ridiculous team. But the Lakers, I know you definitely caught the game 1 of the Lakers season. I have a couple takeaways. I already made a video on the offense, so
Yeah,
I've
shout
kind of
out.
already spoken my piece on what they did. One thing I want to point out is that Anthony Davis had 89 touches, which is a great sign because yes, they're running the offense through him. I think he led the Lakers in touches, which is a rare thing from last year.
Last 2 years.
Last 2 years, yeah, just running the offense through him, and whether it was the pinch post up top or those middle of the floor isolations, or even like using him like a wing, putting Gobert in ball screen action. I
Yep.
loved the way Davis was used. That was awesome. And also, we didn't really talk about this, but I'm just gonna throw a take out there because we haven't really made any takes yet in this episode. When we did our Western Conference rankings, I only ranked my top 5. And you ranked your top 8 or 9, and I think you had Suns 6, Lakers 7. I didn't want to speak up then, but after one game, I'm feeling pretty confident. I would go Lakers 6, Suns 7. I think the Lakers are better. I think the Lakers are close. I would even make the argument they're closer to being top 5 than they are to being a play-in team. I don't know how you. Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that because I know you're the Lakers guy.
So Laker fans definitely gave me a lot of shit after opening after having them 7th. Although to defend myself just a little bit, 1 is a preseason ranking, guys. Cut me some slack, and 2, I had them anywhere between 5th to 7th.
Sure.
I thought that was kind of our 4th to 7th even. I preseason said like, yeah, they're kind of the same team, like Minnesota, Memphis, Phoenix, Lakers. Like they're all kind of like grouped up together as like the middle class, if you will, of the Western Conference, and then it's like Dallas, Denver, and then it's OKC above everybody else. So that's kind of how I felt about the Lakers. I guess like my biggest takeaway from that opening night game for LA is, 1, I think this team's defensive ceiling is a little bit higher than I gave them credit for, especially when you throw Vando back into the mix. Because I didn't expect them to mix up stuff to the point that they did. Like the amount of different ways they use AD, had him as a hedge guy. They had some of the deep drop stuff, also like kind of more up to touch drop. They threw out the 3-2, which I mean I think it's fun, but Minnesota kind of like picked it apart. I think that, but again, also like to their credit, you throw Vando out there in that 3-2 with AD, and Vando's on the back line. Even if you want to keep that look, it's a lot better instead of being Rui on the back line.
They also switched AD onto Ant down the stretch. That was another thing they did, and he was playing great defense.
Switched him on to Ant a few times. They blitz. They didn't blitz, but they doubled him after the screen. Like if you switch the first screen, most teams, especially now, they'll just kind of they'll let the switch happen, and then right as the ball handler starts to get comfortable, starts to try to like rock him to sleep. Okay, cool, let's go double. Let's send a frantic double right quick.
Which is exactly what the Wolves should have done against Luka in Game 2. But I digress. I digress.
Getting Rudy cooked on the timeline for all eternity. Thanks, Jaden McDaniel. And then I guess the second thing, and I've kind of been saying this all summer, because if you know JJ and kind of how JJ talks, one of the people that he continues to like credit for being like one of his coaching friends or whatever is Joe Mazzulla. And if you listen to Joe Mazzulla talk, Joe Mazzulla is a sicko and is crazy about finding any possible way to get his team extra possessions. And particularly in the first half, but just in general, the intention of we're going to create extra possessions, whether it's on the offensive glass, they dominated the offensive glass in the first half. I mean, Austin Reeves had 4 offensive rebounds, led the entire team in offensive rebounds. There's a play, I want to say in the third, where a shot goes up. Anthony Davis is like at least behind the free throw line. AD just crashes like a madman, gets it easy, a relatively easy putback. But again, the intention, I know we're going to crash the glass, be maniacs. Boston was I want to say they were top 5 in offensive rebounding percentage last season. That sounds right. I have to fact check that. But the just intention to create extra possessions and really the scheme versatility defensively. The offense, I really don't have any major thoughts on because it's kind of what I expected in terms of how they're going to use them. And shout out to my guy, Don Connect, man. Like, there's not a better match made in heaven, I think, from any, draft player than Don Connect going to play with JJ Redick, who, I mean, Don's probably just a souped-up JJ. I think I said that last episode, too.
You did.
So
Yeah,
this was a fun game.
Got deja vu. The Celtics were 12th in offensive rebound percentage, actually.
Okay.
But it's not much separation between 12 and 6. 12 and 6 is separated by 0.6%. So they were right there they were right in that mix of being close to a top 5 team in offensive rebound percentage. And the Lakers were number 30. Number 30 at 19.9. So, that's a good point. Like I said, I don't really have much else to go on with the Lakers. I already kind of talked about it in the video. I want to see more still. But, I really like the way they're using AD specifically, and I think that could do a lot of work on shifting the narrative because I feel like AD went from someone who was routinely considered to be an MVP candidate type of player to ever since he had those coupled injured campaigns in 21 and 22. Since
22 is like complete fluke injuries too.
Yeah.
He got thrown into Cat got thrown into his knee, and then Malik Monk throws one of the worst lob passes ever, and his ankle just touches the earth.
And I was saying that there's two problems that came from that. One, he got the Data Davis made of glass, which I keep getting comments about every time I talk about the Lakers on YouTube. It's like some weird comment about, oh, it holds up until Glass Man gets injured. And it's like, didn't he play 75 games last year or something? That it created that narrative. And also because I think he was even out of shape during those years. Like I remember he put on weight and just wasn't moving like he usually does.
Year.
Yeah, and so these last 2 years, he's been, I wouldn't say he's been back to what he was in like 2020, but he's been closer to that. And everyone kind of treats him as like an afterthought, like not to index on inside the NBA, but their ranking, one of them had him 19th. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, this is like Anthony Davis is clearly like, I had him I had him 11th. I had him 11th on my end of season rankings, which feels weird. Like it feels low. But my 5 through 11 was like this close. It was to the point where if you just threw Anthony Davis 5th and moved everyone else down one spot, I would feel completely indifferent. And I think people get so obsessed with like the number to number rankings instead of like the tier of player that I think AD's in. I think there's a clear top 4, and then I think AD's in that next tier. And I feel like
what's your top 4? I'm assuming like it's Jokic, Embiid, Luka, Giannis.
Yeah, Jokic, Embiid, Luka, Giannis.
Those
and
are
I think
the 4.
Shea, I might even say Shea is starting to separate himself as like a clear 5, and then they're 6 through 11. But I just think AD needs to get more credit as that caliber of player. And if he gets more primacy under JJ Redick's offense and can get to like 27, 28 points per game, get a couple more assists, like we saw against Minnesota, I think that's a big step in the direction for just the narratives surrounding him.
Yeah.
Dude, these segues are perfect because speaking of narratives, Cade Cunningham, the Pistons. I was gonna say, I know you were so excited to talk about them and him specifically because that was kind of one of your teams that we were talking about in our couple preseason episodes. You kept bringing up the Pistons, man. Watch out for the Pistons. And I know they lost, but there was a lot to like. I want to start out by saying heliocentric Cade Cunningham, love it. He touched the ball 102 times, which is like, that's a lot of touches. And I love it because the Pistons are over-reliant on him to be a ball handler. And for him to touch the ball that many times and still produce like he did with the efficiency that he did, to me is just such a good sign of his growth as a player. Because there aren't many, I feel like people don't give enough credit to young guys who can take on that level of responsibility. Like we got used to Luka Doncic and Trae Young, which are total anomalies. But like these other young guards aren't supposed to be able to do that early without some decision-making errors. And so Cade doing that, I think, speaks to the type of player he's going to be and already is. Specifically with the spacing, or did you want to add to that?
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. No,
Go.
you touch on the spacey right quick. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to say with the spacing specifically, we knew that the added shooting would help, but the thing that stood out most to me was actually their floor positioning and the way they had Cade operating. Because when you just say, oh, there's going to be more spacing, that could mean a number of things. That could mean, hey, they're going to put him in the middle of the floor and shrink everyone to the corners and it's the baseline rather, and have him operate in the middle of the floor. It could mean we're going to run spread pick and roll and you can't bring help from the low man because I'll spray it to that corner. But actually what I noticed with the Pistons was they were doing a lot of open corner isolation, using Cade like a wing. And he was just torching every matchup because he's kind of a walking mismatch. When it was a smaller defender like Nemhard or Matherin, he was playing out of the mid post and like he got to a jump hook. There was one play where he was off ball and sealed off position for a deep entry. He had one turnaround fade over the left shoulder that was beautiful.
Yep.
And then whenever it was a bigger matchup,
In traffic too.
Yeah, he was using his change of pace, using his handle. The pull up jumper was falling. Yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in on Cade. I don't know if I'm all in on the Pistons, because I still think there's some level of like just talent deficiency. But yeah, I love what I saw from Cade.
Yeah. First off, man. So I didn't watch the game that night, but I made a point out this like no, this is the first game I'm watching. So the following day, I would have watched this yesterday, so Thursday morning, I think. Yeah, they play Wednesday night. So first day I didn't watch this game Thursday morning, and I think I'm texting you as I'm rewatching the game. And one of the things I said, I'm like, dog, Cade is just so daggone good. I mean, just if we're talking about purely scoring ability, and not even scoring, just kind of running the show, and he's a very good playmaker too, and decision maker, and be able to set guys up. His 2-man game with Jaylen Duren, who, by the way, Jaylen Duren or whatever, like, shout out Jaylen Duren too. Like, the thing I've been noticing, I watched a couple of preseason games. I watched this game Wednesday night. This is probably the most active I've seen Jaylen Duren defensively in his entire career. And for that, JB Bickerstaff deserves his jersey retired. Now Jaylen Duren is a good to like very good defender. Then we need to build JB Bickerstaff a statue, because that is a miracle. But Cade, man, his footwork, his timing, his pace. I said in episode 1, it's very SGA in a way. Like, very herky-jerky type of style where he's going to get to his spots, and there's not very much you could do about it because, you know, some players will have the pace, but not the level of footwork and the different angles and stuff to get there. And he has this nasty, I think, spin along the baseline, if I recall correctly, and able to get...
Yes, I was just going to bring up the play that was so SGA-esque. It was 98 to 99. There were a few minutes left. He did like an in and out into a cross, got really low attacking left baseline, and then counter spin back towards the middle and had like an off balance one-handed float. And I was like, that looks exactly like Shea. Exactly like Shea.
So Cade's awesome. Ron Holland is just like this big old ball of juice right now and energy. He's like a 7-year-old kid. I think that's another take I've said a lot recently.
Yep.
The decision making and stuff, like I think at the very least he's pretty quick with his timing and things like that. The jumper's gonna fall, but I'm still impressed with how quick he is at making that next pass or just being decisive of what he wants to do once the ball does get to him, which I appreciate. I don't have a big take on Ivy. I think Ivy was fine. I think that we'll see the good from Ivy going forward. And this is just a game that the Pistons are going to learn to win eventually. That's kind of like the bigger takeaway. I think the Pistons, they're a lot better than they were last year, for one, right?
Yeah.
But this is still like a frisky 30-ish win team on the high end probably, and a team that just has to find ways to learn to win these types of games, because they were up. They looked really, dare I say, surgical, and then you can kind of sense it somewhere in the third quarter where they just fell flat. Like, what do we do now? We're not used to being up 11 in the middle of the third quarter. And that's where you kind of saw the experience, I guess, because Pacers is still kind of a pretty young team. The experience of that Pacers team catch up, and Mathurin had a really fun stretch. Pascal had a really fun stretch, and it'd be good on the Pacers for finding a way to win this game, because this felt like a weird game for the Pacers for 80% of it, where their timing and rhythm and to things was pretty off. I think early. This is about as bad of a Halliburton game you're gonna get, from the sense of running the show, playing with elite pace, and like they're super fast running and gunning type of offense. Probably the worst you're gonna see that all year. Yeah. So them finding a way to get it out and find a way to win this one. Jarris Walker wasn't that great, which sucks. But shout out Miles Turner, who had this burner of a third quarter. Yeah. And then shout out Ben Mathurin as well.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing down the stretch of that game also some of the development curve for Cade. Because if I remember correctly, he missed like 2 or 3 layups down the stretch that could have probably swung the result. And I think like that still highlights one of his bigger issues as a player is the finishing around the rim. And I think a lot of people look at poor finishing numbers around the rim and kind of just assume like, that's just a flaw he's going to have. Like Cade's going to develop and be a flawed finisher. He's got to find ways to work around that. But I think there are ways to improve as a finisher. And it's not just as simple as like, let's get better touch or let's do this. I think, because one example I'll always bring up when I talk about finishing is Donovan Mitchell, for his first couple of years, was like someone who could get to the rim, but wasn't great at converting. Like his percentages actually at the rim weren't phenomenal. And it was either 2021 or 2022. He just took like a 10% leap. And it was like, oh, this is Donovan Mitchell when he's actualized. I actually don't remember exactly which year it was. I want to assume it was 2021 because that kind of felt like the big leap for him.
I'm checking now. So 2020, 2021, which would have been the year after the bubble. Hold on, wait. Yeah. This year, per synergy at the rim is at 52% at the rim. If you go to the next year, which would have been 21, 22, which I think this would have been the year that they were the one. Yeah, this year he shot almost 60% of the rim.
Well, I was going to say, just playoffs. Just off of Basketball Reference, 2019, you got 62% from 0 to 3 feet.
Okay.
2020, the bubble year, 63%. 2021, 61%. So consistently low 60s. Then it was 71%, 70%, 70%. Yep. And it's like you can clearly mark the leap. Like it's so obvious. And I feel like we could see a similar thing with Cade. Because like I said, like there were some really nice finishes around the rim in that game. And then just at the very end, the old stuff took over and he missed a couple easy ones. And it was like, almost. Yeah, but not to spend too much time on the Pistons after one game.
One last thing.
For sure.
One last thing. I'm glad you brought that up with kind of their late game offense. They got to kind of figure out what's their easy button, because right now down the stretch, like easy button, Jokic post ups or 2-man game, Jokic and Murray, for example, right? Just when I think easy game to generate great shots down the stretch. I mean, even Indiana, it's like how these spread pick and rolls will space the floor. I'll let him kind of operate and facilitate.
Yeah.
Where Detroit, it's, all right, Cade, we're going to give you the ball in the middle of the floor and pray you can hit a heavily contested jumper over 3 dudes, because eventually, like, they're just going to, I mean, yes, Beasley and Tobias and, I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr., but, I mean, if this guy has 30 on me and it's a 1-possession game with 3 minutes left, I don't care who's over there, right? We're going to commit to that guy. Yeah. And I don't think they did a great job of really getting easy shots for Cade down the stretch. It was kind of, all right, Cade, here's the ball, go, and hopefully get something good for us here. So that's one other thing that probably keep an eye out on throughout the rest of the season.
For sure. Did you watch Grizzlies Jazz at all?
I watched some of it. I definitely saw the Ja stuff. Ja was incredible.
Okay, so there's I feel like there's quite a few takeaways we can get from this game, but I don't want to spend too much time on it just because the Jazz probably aren't ready to compete yet still. Yeah. And the Grizzlies were missing a lot of guys. Just a couple takeaways. One, the main reason I don't think the Jazz are ready to be competitive is because there's a clear direction they're headed in, and I'm not sure I'm on board with it. It's the fact that if they were trying to win as many games as possible this season, Colin Sexton would be their primary offensive creator. But it looks like they insist on turning Keontae George into that guy because they view him as more of a part of their future. And I don't know if that's the type of player Keontae George is or ever will be. I want to say he was 3 for 18 against the Grizzlies.
Really rough game.
And it's a result of him having the ball. Like, they just wanted him to create so much. And I just don't know if that's the direction for development. But besides that, like, everything else you can like with the Jazz was there. Lauri Markkanen, hyper efficient 35-point game. You already know what he's gonna do. I'm not sure if you saw the defensive strategy that Memphis used with Zach Edey. Like, we've seen leaving non-shooters open. They were completely abandoning Walker Kessler, like turning their back to him.
They turned Walker Kessler in the slot and made him like a 45 cut dude.
Exactly.
Thank you, Will Hardy.
And I was just gonna say, Will Hardy's a freaking mastermind. Like, I love that guy. I can't wait till
Top
the
tier
Jazz.
offensive coach in the league.
I would say, honestly, like, just off the top when you say that, like, I feel like the first 3 names that come to mind are Rick Carlisle, Quinn Snyder, and Will Hardy.
Yep.
I mean, but you also got Mark Daniel. Dude, yeah, I don't know, but it's like there's a lot. There's a lot of good offensive coaches right now. Yeah. He's in the mix. And Walker Kessler had a huge game in general. Like, his rim protection, his rebounding, his, like you said, 45 cutting and diving and scoring over Edey in the paint. Good stuff. But like I said, the Jazz really don't seem ready to be competitive to me. And on the Grizzlies side, there was a lot. Like I said, I think they were missing. I know they were missing Jaren, Gigi Jackson. I want to say they were also missing Vince Williams. Just lots of guys out, and they got some really nice production from role guys, which I'll talk about in a sec. First thing, not a great performance for Zach Edey. I think he did some nice stuff as a rim protector and on the glass, but fouled out in 14 minutes. Not great, not ideal, especially after I just spent the whole preseason raving about the guy. I was kind of cringing watching that performance. But Jay Huff came in and looked like a starting level big, so I was like, oh, I mean, there's another sign. I think we both talked about how the Grizzlies just have remarkable depth. That's a good sign. I'm a huge Santi Aldama fan. For him to be like a 7-footer with mobility is already like a 7-footer who can move kind of like a 3 on both ends. To me is already a great baseline for a player. But then you add in the fact that he can dribble and pass, and he's I wouldn't say he's an above average shooter, but he will shoot and he'll make some. That's a really nice player to have as like your 7th or 8th guy, because he's a super good connective piece on both ends who can do a lot of things. And depending on how your lineup looks, he can kind of just fill a role. If you have a supersized lineup, he can play the 3. If you're going small, he can probably play the 5 because he is a 7-footer. And so he just slotted in for Jaren Jackson Jr. and played the 4 and did it extremely well. He had a 27-point game in the opener. But the story was Ja Morant. Ja Morant is just so good. Such a good player. We hinted at it with the Ant thing, but the ability to get downhill, his decision-making, his athleticism. There were 2 back-to-back passes down the stretch where he went completely airborne, paused time, and then found Santi Aldama on a baseline cut. And those were like their 2 daggers. And then it was, okay, let's take away all of Ja's passing angles, and then he goes vertical and finishes on Walker Kessler at the rim to seal the game. I love Ja Morant, man. That is a player. That is a player.
I mean, Ja Morant, when he's fully healthy, I think is easily top 20 player. I think I would have to like redo my player rankings, and I will here soon. But I mean, I think he's pretty comfortably from 12 to like 16. Like he's not in the like Ja Morant or Devin Booker. Not to like go off on a side tangent.
Oh, I would say they're in the same tier. Like you kind of hinted at a 12 to 16 tier. All of the names I kind of float around with Ja Morant are like Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
And it's to me, I think Ja and Brunson are clearly the 2 best offensive players of that group. To me, It's about Ja's defense. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if it'll improve this year. I think the last few times we've seen him, it's been very questionable at best.
Yeah. I mean, my only real take with Memphis, let me pull up their schedule here too, really, really fast. They play tonight against Houston. That'll be fun. We'll have the league pass going and watching multiple games here. I think my thing with Memphis is kind of just what it's always been. Don't overthink this team. And then once this team really gets healthy, John Morant being a top 20 player on the planet already gives this team a pretty decent floor. But then you add the fact once they get Jaren Jackson Jr. back, which I'm curious. I don't know what his timeline is off the top of my head, but I'm curious if when Jaren Jackson Jr. gets back, if that just makes Zach Edey's life so much easier, right?
Yeah.
Because now defensively, you can they're going to attack Zach as much. I mean, I think you would at least to test him at the very least, right? Defensively, especially in drop and things like that. But then, and the vision I have is kind of what Milwaukee has with Giannis and Brook. I think that's their vision too, where you have this.
Yeah,
We could call them slow-footed, drop big, and Edey and Lopez, but then we have this Super Saiyan freak right beside them that could just rotate over and literally beat anything off the glass. That is Giannis and Jaren Jackson Jr., and then we kind of zone up on the back end. So I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is just going to make his life so much easier, and teams are going to have to find other ways to attack Memphis defensively, which might be switch hunting job. But again, if Jaren Jackson Jr. is now your free safety, essentially, and Edey's your anchor, then I don't even know how effective attacking Ja's going to be, because I'm just going to funnel you right into Jaren Jackson Jr. So I'm really excited to see Memphis get healthy, and you get Vince Williams back too. I'm not worried about Memphis.
And the
all.
other point with Ja being hunted and getting beat, whatever, and then funneling him into help, is that Ja is like probably one of the 3 or 4 fastest players in the league. So if that's your strategy, he can peel onto the open guy so quickly anyways, and it's like no advantage. I'm all in on the Grizzlies, and I think we both were all in on the Grizzlies heading into the season.
I think.
I had him
Where'd
fifth
you have
as
him
well.
at?
I had him fifth.
I'm excited to see Edey against Sengun tonight for sure. That's gonna be a fun battle.
100%. Another team that we were both all in on, I think, was Atlanta. That's who I want to talk about next. And I just want to ask you a question. This could be the most absurd thing I maybe have ever seen on a stat. I don't even know if it's accurate. That's how absurd it is. If I were to ask you through the first few games of the season, or a few days, I should say, because most teams have only played one game, who was leading the NBA in touches per game, who would come to mind?
Luka, actually.
Luka.
That
Makes sense. Yeah,
the first
Luka,
guy.
Jokic, Trae Young. I said, Cade had 102 touches. Guess who had 104 touches in the opening Hawks game?
Is it Dyson Daniels?
Jaylen Johnson. And I'm kind of like, could that be wrong? Like 104 touches? I feel like
104.
And so I went back and rewatched the game, and I obviously wasn't hand counting the touches. So again, I don't know if it's right. But when Trae went to the bench, Jaylen Johnson was the point guard. I don't know if you noticed that. He was the point guard, and I was like, ooh, that's new. That's new.
They play Charlotte. There's a lot of good games tonight. Good grief.
Yeah, and the Hawks, man, I think the Jaylen Johnson stuff is awesome, because not only was he initiating the offense when Trae was on the bench, whenever Trae was running the offense, they had Johnson one pass away, serving as like the second side creator or connector, and he had a lot of great reads. Like when Trae does that pick and roll going towards the wing, Jaylen would fill out the top of the key and then attack on the move. Just lots of good stuff to like there. They did some 3-man action. They were putting a wing in the dunker spot. They were running cross screens, just all the Quinn Snyder classics. Okongwu had a near 30-point game, and we were talking about Okongwu in our last episode. And then Dyson's defense, just a lot to like. I want to ask what your biggest takeaways were from the Hawks.
I mean, again, I sound like a broken record, but stop overthinking good players. Trae Young And again, I'm glad that everybody's kind of recognizing that this pass is just insane. And even though Dyson Daniels misses,
my gosh,
the pass going right. I think Dyson Daniels is on a shakeup maybe because he like lifts up to like that left wing. Trey's going right to see the angle because he has a man trailing on his inside hip, going towards the middle of the floor. To see the angle, and then normal players will just maybe throw it over the head. This dude goes with the wraparound, just throws it behind his back in the shooting pocket. Mind you, Dyson has to relocate like a step, but it doesn't matter. The angle, the timing on it is insane. I mean, shout out to Brooklyn for keeping it competitive. Like Cam Thomas was insane. Yeah. And I think for Atlanta, I think the lack of just functional defensive players is the bigger concern. Like offensively, this team is going to rack up points between Trey. Dyson has some functionality offensively, obviously. Jaylen, the bigs, regardless of how you feel about either one of them, are going to eat because Trey and Dyson, kind of how they run their stuff, they're going to eat off of putbacks and lobs and dump offs. So, like, will Okongwu average 28 points? No, but they're going to get theirs. You have Bogey off of it. Like, the amount of scores this team has, and they all kind of eat off Trey in a way, and, Jaylen and Bogey kind of get theirs. Kobe Buffkin, who didn't play, I think he's hurt right now, can also create for himself. But the amount of functional defenders this team has. And I guess that's kind of the thing with Okongwu. This is a pretty solid Okongwu game defensively, but that's the thing that, I mean, LaMelo should feast tonight. I mean, Dyson's fun defensively, but I think there's ways that they'll be able to get around the Dyson matchup. But it sucks that Brandon Miller started not think about that with what was a left glute strain, which I've never heard of before.
Yeah.
This Atlanta team's fun. They're a frisky team. They're a team you probably don't want to see because there's the offensive explosiveness that this team has. But yeah, they're gonna be a fun watch. Like we talked about in the preview episodes.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to add on the Hawks point was I think you kind of touched on it very vaguely when you said they're an explosive offensive team. One thing they were doing a lot in game one is they were playing fast. They were playing with a lot of pace, which I think is new. That's not really something we've seen on a Trae Young team. Really interesting because they have so many great open floor athletes like Dyson Daniels, Jaylen Johnson, Reese Shea, whatever the case may be. And also, on the point of them having a lot of weak defenders, I think that can I think that's something that would hurt them more in a playoff series than in the regular season, because I think when you actually look at like their roster the roster makeup, they have a lot of lengthy athletic forwards that they can just put on the floor. And I feel like if you're trying to like craft a team that's going to win a lot of regular season games, that could end up mattering more than talent. Like just muck up the floor with a bunch of lengthy athletes, because they're not. I feel like in the regular season, teams aren't hyper indexing on let's attack this matchup, let's attack this. So if you just have like four guys on the court who are 6'8" with plus wingspans and vertical presence, all of a sudden it's like Trae Young just kind of has to tread water, and you're gonna get some stops. So I do think the Hawks are right on par with what we were talking about in our last episode. I don't want to spend too much time on this next one. Just kind of want to throw out there. It was about the Clippers, the heliocentric James Harden thing. It was pretty much exactly what I expected. He shot 10 for 28 with 8 turnovers, which I think sounds really bad. Like you hear those numbers and you're like, ooh, that's not good. But I actually think it's more of an overarching point with like, there's going to be a lot of highs and lows when you have this version of James Harden dominating the ball. Like, he drove the ball. He had 33 drives against the Suns, which is just absurd. And he has
the league leader last year at 26, I think, or maybe it was 28. But the point is that's absurd.
Yeah, and he had very little he has very little to no interior scoring punch at this point. So a lot of those drives were either just needless kickouts or good dump offs, or him utilizing the mid range. And I really like mid range Harden. Like, that's a really fun thing to see because he does have a lot of counters. He's a really good shooter. But like I said, because his scoring is so reliant on the jump shooting, not just the mid range, but the pull up threes, of course. There's going to be really high highs and there's going to be really low lows, which it just brings me back to that Boston series where like he'd have a 45-point game and then the next game would have 9.7 turnovers.
Game
and
6,
like,
Game 7, I think.
Yeah, and it's like, ooh, yeah, that's not too good. Maybe Harden's not as good as we thought. It's just going to be streaky. So I think the Clippers are just like banking on getting enough of those highs to where they could have easily won that Phoenix game because Kevin Durant was bad for 3 quarters. Obviously, in the fourth, he kind of took over, and OT he kind of took over. And then Devin Booker was bad all 4 quarters and fouled out. That's a game you don't want to drop, and it's just bad timing. I don't know if you even caught that game or if you even care about the Clippers. Like,
I don't have a because my take is kind of what you've said, and we've talked about this in the past too. Like the Clippers, they'll have those explosive highs with Harden because when Harden is on, like this version of Harden especially, like you're gonna get a couple 40-point outbursts, I think, from Harden. So that he's gonna look and remind you of peak Harden, at least some iteration of that. But I mean, again, I think the biggest concern for this team is that's kind of the way they're going to win every game right now.
Yeah.
At least until Kawhi gets back. And I think because that's the only way, even though it's the regular season, I think good NBA teams are going to say, "Oh, okay, we're just going to switch everything and Harden kill us, right? We're going to cut off the water with the passing because again, I just don't. You can't put 2 on the ball with Harden." Or even to a certain extent, I'm not even going to play drop a ton with Harden. I'm really just going to switch and say, Harden, can you cook our 6'10" wing in space?
Yeah.
Or something along those lines, right? And we're going to cut off the water. If you get 50, you get 50, you're going to lose by 30. And that's completely okay. So I don't have a big thoughts on the Clippers right now. I caught some of the game.
Yeah.
I think they play tonight too. Or maybe they play tomorrow.
Another thing I'd like to point out on your point with like the switching and whatnot, pretty crazy. It was Kevin Durant who was giving Harden the work on defense down the stretch. Like Kevin Durant was the one picking up Harden, and what is he, 36 years old? Like, salute to 36-year-old Kevin Durant doing that because I think LeBron kind of rewrote what it means to have longevity. Like Kevin Durant doing that is special, and we need to appreciate that.
The Clippers play Golden State Sunday, and I'm gonna call this out. I would be pretty surprised if Harden has a good game against Golden State. That's just a bad matchup, I think, where Golden State's going to get tricky and weird with how they're going to guard them with their defensive schemes and stuff like that. They have the multitude of different bodies to throw at them, and then they also have that Draymond Green guy on the back line.
He's
like,
all right. He's
okay. He's only like, I don't know, a top 5 defensive player since 2000, but, who cares about that guy? But whatever Harden, you're hearing it here first. Whatever Harden's unders are, I would take those against the Warriors.
All right. I'm not taking your word
watch
for it.
He goes for 40
I'm not taking your word for it, but someone out there might.
There we go.
And yeah, I just wanted to close out this episode real quick before we head out. Just touch on a couple big individual performances that we saw from the first few days. Like Paolo Banchero versus Miami. I've been putting together highlight tapes, so if anyone wants to watch those, like they're all on all my platforms like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. I've been looking in every game I watch. I'm kind of compiling little tapes, just focusing on the highs and seeing what the good things are. Like Paolo Banchero, the Magic were doing a ton of switch hunting because the Heat put Miami on Paolo, and
the Heat put Miami.
That's crazy. We've been recording for too long. I looked up. I was like, I didn't say that right. The Heat put.
Who am I to correct somebody with my horrible
okay.
at times?
Let's try that again.
We're all good.
The Heat put Bam Adebayo.
There we go. I was like, who did they put on Paolo?
He's basically Miami at this point.
There we go.
The Heat put Bam Adebayo on Paolo, and he's like a perfect physical matchup for Paolo with his size, agility, length, and so Paolo can't really bully him. And I think there were like 3 different possessions throughout the entire game where Paolo did kind of force the issue and settle against Bam with like weird long twos. And it's like, we don't want those, Paolo. We don't want those. But the rest of the game, they were just relentlessly switch hunting for anyone besides Bam. So if it was Jimmy, Haywood Highsmith, Duncan Robinson, it didn't matter. They just wanted someone else on Paolo. And then he was an absolute freight train. I think there were 2 different instances of the Heat broadcast calling him a Mack truck. And it was like just him just barreling his way in and scoring inside or getting to the line. And the shot diet is the big thing for me, because that's been my biggest criticism of Paolo for the last 2 years is the shot diet. And it's like, hey, if Paolo Banchero is finally going to start playing like Blake Griffin, that's really good for the Magic. That's really scary for the league. And he had an efficient 33-point game and was plus 42 in just a blowout win.
Yeah, Paolo was insane. And what also makes him such a tough guard when he's being this decisive and being this aggressive at attacking mismatches and getting to the rim is he's such a good playmaker when he wants to be.
Yes.
Some of the, like, he had the sick behind the back from kind of like the elbow extended, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
To Franz, kind of along the baseline, easy money. And then my problem with Paolo coming into the year was I didn't really know how sustainable that series was against Cleveland, where he was great. Like, objectively, Paolo was phenomenal in that series against Cleveland offensively. But you look at kind of your point, like the shot diet and things like that's like, is that over an 82 game sample size or even a longer playoffs like sample size? So let's say they face Boston in the second round. That's not happening.
It would have
to that level
to the mean for sure. Yeah.
Dang, exactly. But dang, seeing that, like, again, the intention on, no, we're going to attack these switches. We're going to get downhill. Because then, again, that also is able to leverage into his playmaking where the defense is playing a rotation. He's able to dish it out and really get in his bag. So shout out to Paolo. KCP shot 0 for 5, and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
This team is crazy deep. I think they're also kind of hurt right now. I feel like somebody didn't play, or maybe I'm making that up.
I'm not sure, honestly. I know they had like their main guys. I'm pretty sure. Did Jonathan Isaac play?
Yeah, Jonathan Isaac played. Okay, so yeah, I think everybody played then.
Okay.
Paulo, Franz, Gary, Jada. I also like Jalen Suggs played like 12 minutes or something.
Yeah,
which was weird, but I'm excited to keep watching Orlando.
Paolo probably would have gone for 40 if it was a closer game. So yeah, it's special performance. Another one is Evan Mobley. Oh my goodness, dude!
Those possessions of him guarding Scotty 1-on-1 in ISO,
dude. Like, I threw his name in there for the Defensive Player of the Year conversation when we were talking about it, but I don't think I gave enough credit to the type of defender he is. Like, from guarding Scotty to fighting through ball screens to playing drop to playing
guarding quickly one-on-one.
Playing quickly one-on-one, playing the middle of a zone and shutting off the paint, and then switching 1 through 5. Like, dude, there's nothing he can't do defensively. Like, if we were to make a list of the top 5 most versatile defenders, he would be a lock. Like, he'd be a lock to be on the list. It'd be like the first names that come to mind for me would be like Bam, AD, Draymond, and Mobley would be like my 4. And then like OG maybe filling out that list like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, like that. There's many guys you can put up there with Evan Mobley. And then the offense, like that's the big thing because they were using him more as an initiator. Like he was playing point and transition. It almost kind of reminded me of like we were talking about Chet flares. Like that's kind of the touches, not the same exact action, but the type of touches they were trying to get Mobley, and like his ability to play physical as a downhill creator. There was one, and I don't know what the type of game or like what the situation of the game was, what quarter, whatever. But he had a really physical drive, where he just dropped the shoulder, got to the rim, missed his own shot like twice. It actually might have been like the first possession of the game. Just kept following his own miss over and over again. And then later in the game, I think it was the fourth quarter, he had another drive that was similar, but the defense collapsed. And so he dropped the shoulder in the same way, but instead to turn around for a Kevin Garnett looking jumper. And I was like, man, if this offensive leap is real, like that's an all-star. That's an all-star lock.
If he's an all-star lock, then I'm going to look like an idiot for my Cavs take. Although I'm going to kind of give myself some slack here by saying my Cavs hatred, if you will, is only because I didn't like the fit. But if Evan Mobley's an all-star and he's playing like this offensively, I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah. And I don't know if the leap's here. I don't know if the leap's ever going to come. But, like, if there was ever a time for the Mobley mob is what they were calling themselves during the draft.
Man,
This is it. Like this could be the leap. And I'm totally overreacting to one game against a team that's not that competitive. But I'm the Cavs are like number one on my league pass right now just because I want to watch Evan Mobley and see if this is real.
Well, number one on my league pass right now, like I said, I'm turning on this game as soon as we're done, is Charlotte because Lamelo Ball is insane. Like he has these just quick bursts, and I my take, this would have been 2 years ago now, is I had him kind of like comfortably as a tier 2 playmaker, I think, because I think we've had this conversation in the past. I think tier 1 is, for me at least, Trey, Hallie, Jokic, Luka. I think Braun's kind of top of tier 2 because the turnovers have been a little bit of a problem, particularly the last year or so. But anytime Braun wants to be tier 1, he's still comfortably in that top level. But then LaMelo, my thing kind of last year when he was healthy and kind of the year before that was he doesn't have the like consistently like night in night out surgical I'm going to pick you apart type of playmaking where it doesn't matter. He's going to see these passing angles. Not that he can't make the passes necessarily, but like on a consistent basis, picking apart of the defense, reading the low man, stuff like that. And he was just surgical all night against Houston. Trey Mann is going to get legit 6 man of the year votes if, like, let's say Sacramento doesn't make the playoffs. Trey Mann like might have a real shot, maybe even winning 6 man of the year. That's how good he's been. Sucks that Brandon Miller's hurt, but I mean Charlotte. I mean, God, if they can stay freaking healthy, this team is also going to be a fun play-in team.
Yeah, to me, what's so funny about the LaMelo performance to me is everyone saw what he did in game 1 and kind of used that to be like, oh, LaMelo took a leap. This is like serious. Like he's a superstar. And to me, it was like the exact same LaMelo from the end of last year before he got hurt. Like he went on a stretch of averaging like 30 and 10 and was doing like he just did the exact same things he was already doing. You just weren't awake. Like you just weren't watching. LaMelo is a very, very serious talent. The pull-up three-point shooting, the passing, the ability to play with pace.
Got some defensive stops in there too.
Yes, and I saw people were clipping that, which is funny because I feel like the only thing with LaMelo is that he's just so nonchalant, so you don't even picture him playing defense. Like it's like he's just like the last player you'd expect to really like dig down and have a defensive possession. But I think LaMelo had an awesome game, and I'm super excited to watch more of the Hornets. Last thing, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say like excited is not how I felt watching that Philly Bucks game.
That's the next thing.
Drag.
Next thing I wanted to bring up.
Respectfully.
I do think there's one good thing you can draw on. It's that Dame and Giannis both had a good game, which. Last year it was usually like one or the other. It was rare to see the both be clicking, and that's a great sign in game 1. Dame looked awesome with his athleticism, his conditioning, but mostly the confidence with the pull-up 3 because last year it felt like he was passing up. It was almost like he was trying to fit in with the Bucks instead of having the Bucks fit around him. Whereas in game 1 he was dribbling past half court. If they didn't meet him off that initial ball screen, it was up.
I'm chucking it.
Burying 30-footers like it was nothing. Contested pull-up threes. That's the Dame I know. But actually, my biggest takeaway wasn't how Dame looked. It was the way that the Bucks used Giannis. I hinted at this in a tweet, and to me, it's the Doc Rivers effect, where if you remember, Joel Embiid, first year as an MVP candidate, 2021, they still had Brett Brown, I believe. And a lot of Embiid's touches were post-ups. They were open-side post-ups, whatever the case may be, low post. And it was Joel Embiid playing with his back to the basket. When Doc Rivers got there and took over the offense, the biggest change he made was turning Embiid around, having him face up so he could see where the help was coming from, and it improved his passing. And it improved his face-up game. It improved his pull-up jumper. Just the points of operation changed. And to me, that was right away noticeable in game 1 of Giannis. Instead of the open side post-ups, instead of like this big question mark in the half court, it was, hey, we're going to get the ball to Giannis on the elbow or at the free throw line. He's going to face up from the middle of the floor. And the defense has to make the defense has to make a decision because he's too explosive of an athlete to leave with space. The nail sinks, he's spraying it to one of the wing shooters. There were a couple times where he actually dribbled to the corner and handed off to Dame to set up an open corner two-man game, which I like. And to me, it's like Doc Rivers gets a lot of flack. That, to me, is a great adjustment, and it's basically just turning Giannis and Dame into the same type of offensive approach that Maxey and Embiid were running. And it was successful. It looked really good in game one. Giannis had like one of the most efficient games I've ever seen from a player. And then that's just in addition to the transition stuff, because the big question with Giannis has always been, can he, game slows down, half-court offense, what can you do through Giannis? And to me, that feels like the recipe.
He had one of the cleanest pull-up mid-range jumpers I've ever seen him take. Cash in the second quarter, I think. And really quickly, going back to your point about Dame and the pull-up, Damian Lillard in game one only took one catch-and-shoot three. He took 11 pull-up threes in game one against the Sixers.
Love it.
And that just makes this team so much more dynamic, kind of to your point. I love that you brought up like the conditioning. He visibly looked like he had more athletic juice and just pop with the ball in his hand, which again is really, really important. Be able to get downhill, get some paint touches. I don't have like his drives in front of me or whatever, but it felt noticeable.
Yeah.
And seeing those two guys kind of click and be on the same page, again, those two are probably the only two guys outside, for me at least. I think Indiana still, because I think Indiana is just a team, they have too many guys that can kind of set them up, right? For Milwaukee, they just have at their strength, or when they're playing at their best, they have the best duo, I think, in the East when they're playing their best basketball together. Dame's, like we said, top 10 when he's rolling, and Giannis is, for me at least, the second best player in the game. So I'm excited to see them against Boston on Monday. I think it's in Boston too, so that'll be a fun watch. And it's fun to see Brook defensively too. Like that, I thought defensively, it's against a really bad Sixers team with no Embiid and no Paul George, and their depth's really concerning, I think, right now. Sean Kelly Oubre was kind of a fun watch, but yeah, I don't have any other takeaways for that one. That was a pretty boring game to watch, all things to be considered.
Yeah, my biggest concern with Philly is like they don't have a single rim protector outside of Embiid. Like even Drummond isn't much of a rim protector at all.
Yeah.
And so they're basically just relying on Embiid so heavily to carry their entire interior defense. And it's the same thing. Like, how sustainable is that when you're going against a team like a Boston or Milwaukee in a playoff series or whatever the case may be? But if we have no more last thoughts, I think that'll wrap it up. We pretty much covered damn near the entire league. Like, we didn't really talk about some teams like Jordan Poole, 17-point first quarter explosion. We'll talk about
lose
that.
By 30.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate everyone. Again, like I always say, all two of you still listening. No, I think we got a pretty steady fan base going, so I appreciate everyone listening to this episode. If you're watching it, appreciate you on YouTube. And yeah, man, follow us on Twitter. Mine is Tyler Britton _. His is Sean _Davis without the S. So Sean _DAVI. Follow Hoop Venue on all socials, Follow him on YouTube as well. Someone in the comments actually asked for your YouTube. So shout that out real quick. What's your personal YouTube?
Yeah, go check out the Sports Headline Show on YouTube. I'll make that name a little bit easier. Going to do a rebrand here soon. But yeah, for some NBA stuff in general, like I said, I'm going to do a chat video here soon. So yeah, appreciate you guys. And yeah, this was really, really fun. Love the support we've gotten so far. And yeah, excited for episode 4.
All right. Yep. We'll catch you guys in episode 4.